Hello and welcome to Saints on Cinema. I'm Josh Edlow.
And I am Tim Wild.
That was really enthusiastic, but I guess that's appropriate because tonight we are talking about a general overview of the Cobra Kai series. Now, Tim and I have both watched all 10 episodes, one of us more than the other. Okay, like just to be not as coy about it, I've seen the thing now 2.5 times. So
So you're saying you've seen it more than me. Okay.
yeah, so I actually went all the way through it by myself, and then I went all the way through it again with my son. And I'm halfway through it with my wife, who's not as enthused as me about it for whatever reason. So, but regardless of the reason, here we are, and we're here to kind of discuss that general overview. So, and just so everybody has an idea of our plan here, we've gotten a lot of a great response from everybody on YouTube, a lot of comments. We're at over 1,800 views now, which is phenomenal for us as kind of new YouTube reviewers. And many of the comments were very complimentary, and we appreciated a lot of good feedback. And people asked us, well, when are you going to talk about the rest of the episodes? We look forward to talking about the rest of the episodes. And what we've decided is we're going to do one general overview of the entire series, kind of what our thoughts are generally, and then we are going to, over time, go through each episode in pairs as we did 1 and 2, and go through each one and talk about in more detail the things we noticed from each episode.
We're just going to say right now we're done with the speculations from the trailers and all the misconstrued ideas that we had about it. So we're going to say right now, spoilers. Absolutely, from here on out, anything we talk about with it is going to be spoiling all of it. So go watch it, binge it before you watch the rest of this so you can actually enjoy what we have to say, because this is a really great series. I'll say that. There were some disappointments I had, but yeah, we'll get into that. But it was really great, worth seeing, then come back to this video. But go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, the other thing I would say about that also is that's part of the reason why we waited a little bit longer to go through this, because we wanted to give all the big fans the opportunity to watch it. It's been 4 days now, so any real fan would have seen the entire thing in the first 24 hours. But regardless of that, we're now past spoiler time, and we're ready to divulge all of our fanboy thoughts. So
can I just say to our audience that Josh is being a subtle jerk to me because I couldn't finish it until tonight because I've had a lot of issues and things going on and technical difficulties with my internet, my setup and everything, so I have a different background. But yeah, so I didn't have a lot of option to see it because I refused to watch it on my phone. I wanted to watch it on a bigger screen. So you know what, Josh? You're not just so awesome and a bigger fan just because you've seen it 2.5 times. I have a life and I have things going on in real.
I got to mess with you a little bit. So, okay. So here we are. I wanted to talk about first a general overview. Tim, what did you just generally starting out? What did you think of the series? So you already said you already said you liked it, but what do you think in general?
Okay, so just the general impression I had. First of all, just noting that this was, as we researched, actually, I think it was you, Josh, researched a little more, that YouTube Red actually fought and bid high to get the rights to do this series. And I think that's really admirable because that showed that they had a lot of confidence in what they were going to do with it. And we were kicking it pretty hard from the first couple of trailers. And I'll say right now, the series is great. Visually, it's great. The cinematography is great. The writing is really good. Not perfect. There's some things I don't like about it. But as far as being true to an 80s nostalgia movie of a franchise that is so beloved as The Karate Kid, I was very, very, very satisfied. And I think the creators had the right intent, and they covered everything that they needed to be true to satisfy the fanboy in me of The Karate Kid. That being said, I do think they dropped the ball on a few things, which isn't the end of the world. And there was kind of an angle, and it got me reconsidering a lot of things I thought about the Karate Kid, and the impressions and feelings I had about the characters from the beginning. I think we're gonna get into that a little bit. But can I just say that whoever they had in charge of directing and editing the trailers for this series should be fired and never work in Hollywood again, because he totally sold the wrong things and did not upsell the things that were great about this show. And he put a bad taste in my mouth from the beginning. I'll just say that much, but totally misleading on low expectations. If they want to sell people getting a subscription to watch this, which I know a lot of people that have done now, not just from our impressions, but This has really got a lot of excitement, a lot of heat, or not heat, but a lot of thrill and momentum for people getting into YouTube Red. It's a great time for them to do that. So it's really cool, and I appreciate that as YouTube doing that.
On that, I saw that I think they're up to 8 million views of the already, which is phenomenal considering that before this had never even really heard of YouTube Red. So that's one thing. Also, on the same vein of you talking about how the trailers didn't really sell the series properly, I would say that I owe a huge apology to everyone involved with this series from the very beginning, because at the very beginning, we both kind of crapped on this series. You know, we kind of looked at the trailers, or the teasers rather, and said, this does not look good. It looks very campy. It looks like it hasn't been filmed very well. It's the directors or the creators of YouTube, what was it, Hot Tub Time Machine? And I was like, oh boy, not a huge fan of that. But the things that I loved about this one, I agree. When I reread and found out that YouTube Red actually fought for this and outbid everybody for this, I think that was very admirable. They got it. And two, there are times in this where it does look like it's shot a little cheaply, but I wouldn't have it any other way. And here's the reason why. It's clear from the very beginning that the people who created this are not from some rich, a big studio who's trying to profit off of the nostalgia of the Karate Kid, a la the Jaden Smith Karate Kid, Will Smith, what I call the box.
Hey, back off. We'll get to that another time, but this is a peaceable conversation. We're not going to start slinging mud about a great movie, but go ahead.
Well, but the point is I think we both agree that a lot of the times these nostalgia flicks are just an excuse for big studios to make millions of dollars off of people's love of 80s and 90s franchises. It's just, that's the way it is. This is not that. You can tell that these are legitimate fans who wanted to do it right. And you just have to look at the attention to detail in all of the episodes and all the things that they do. We'll get into that a little bit more in this, to see that this series was about doing justice to the series. And I'll agree with you. I don't think I'll ever be able to watch the Karate Kid trilogy the same way again, because of all of the different things that they did in this to kind of muddy the waters about who's the villain and who is the hero, and the circumstances everybody came into. So I applaud everybody who was involved in this. It's a great series. It is probably the best homage to an 80s movie that I've ever seen. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. I think that was the best thing to take away from it, is that these people really, really, really cared about the show, that they cared about the franchise, they cared about the characters, and they wanted to get the audience to take a deeper look at the characters and reconsider, like I said, characters that they've known for 30 years now. I think it was really amazing how they did that. They made you appreciate certain characters and reconsider how not so awesome other characters were. But that's not what the theme about the show was, and that's kind of the first thing we want to kind of get into, is just the overall plot. What did you think, Josh, about the overall story? Not the individual characters. We'll just kind of talk about those couple of things. But just the overall story. I mean, this is a spoiler, so everyone's already seen it, but the inverted relationships between Daniel and Johnny, and then their proteges, which are also inverted in character, and their motivations and everything are very emulating of the original characters, but inverted, like I said. I think it was brilliantly written, this story for the general plot of the whole story. I think it was a little short. I messaged Josh before tonight when I finally finished the last episode. I was so frustrated. I think they needed a couple more episodes to really to ease into the turns and everything that happened at the end of it. But as far as the overall plot, Josh, what did you think?
I really liked it. I thought it was great. I think from episode to episode, you really got an opportunity to see. If you look at the crossover, like I said, to be putting them in different positions. You know, now Daniel is the rich kid who's on top, and Johnny Lawrence is the underdog, and they're proteges. I guess the main thing I got out of this is it goes back to what Mr. Miyagi said in the first movie. There's no such thing as a bad student, only a bad teacher, right? So Miguel is so much like Daniel from the original. I mean, from straight down to living in Reseda, being poor, being bullied, being picked on. And you can see that Robbie is very similar to Johnny. I mean, obviously, he's his son, right? He doesn't really have a father in his life. He's got a mother that wants to do the best for him and is trying to find a father figure for him or somebody to marry that's going to take care of her, similar to what it appears that Johnny's mother did with Sid, who you meet in episode 1, who's a total jerk.
Wait, which one was Sid?
Sid was the stepfather.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So you can see that it's almost as if Johnny had learned Mr. Miyagi's version of karate and Daniel had learned the Cobra Kai way, Daniel would have come out like Johnny and Johnny would have come out like Daniel. I mean, you also get a sense here that if Daniel and Johnny had met in any other circumstances at all, they would have been friends. They're almost the same character, just in different, their paths just took them in different ways.
I don't think so. I don't buy that. And that was one thing I didn't like about it, especially towards the end. I think they hammered a little too hard this sympathy and reflection on Johnny. I love Johnny's character. This is his story. I think in my mind, the first movie is Daniel's story. Or I'm sorry. I think the first movie is Daniel's story. The second movie is Miyagi's story. The third movie is John Kreese's story, even though he's barely in it. And this is Johnny's story. I think they pushed too hard, especially in that last episode, all the little similes and to where the match was almost move by move. It was almost the exact same thing that happened in the original movie. I think they forced it too much that you couldn't really see. I mean, they were doing a really good job making you see both sides of Johnny and the turmoil and the conflict he was going through as he was kind of transitioning from, you know, his down and out state in life to kind of getting his balance back in his life and getting the dojo going and getting his focus back, and then seeing some benefit in these kids' lives. He was a good influence. He liked feeling like he was a good father figure. And then even reaching out to his own son when he was writing a letter towards the very end. And then all the little back and forth stuff that happened in the end, it was just like they tried too hard to mirror the first movie. And I appreciated it, but I think it was a misstep. I think they tried a little too hard. It took me out of it when I was watching. I was like, it was just too staged. That whole encounter. One thing you got to give it to the Jackie Chan movie with Jane Smith in there. It was a different fight. The ending was the same as the first movie, but that whole thing worked and ended a little differently, even though he still got injured and everything. It felt like an original. A different fight. This one felt like the exact same fight, only they were just forcing so much the negative emotions from Cobra Kai to the good, really weak, positive influence from the Miyagi dojo.
So on that point, there are a couple things. One, I love the attention to detail, and I'll give you a couple of examples. So in episode 2, when Daniel is talking to his son and his son doesn't want to go with him to get even a drink and he just wants to play his game, and Daniel's talking about, boy, if I would have killed to be in a place like this. And he says something that's really interesting. He says, when I was in Newark, when I was a kid, the only place I could go was to my Aunt Tessie's house and do all this stuff. And I thought, wow, what attention to detail. Because if you remember in the first movie, when he comes to the Southside Apartments and he walks up and he sees the old lady there, I believe her name is Miss Cole, or maybe not Miss Cole, something else. He comes up to her and, they have that conversation where she says, oh, I'm from Newark, or I'm from New Jersey. I never should have left. I'm from Parsippany. And then he walks up to his mom and he says, hey, did you tell the lady that we were from New Jersey? She says, yeah, doesn't that remind you of your Aunt Tessie? Right? Like, That's the only reference to Aunt Tessie, but they made sure to reference her in episode 2. Also, other things like Louis, his cousin. He has an Uncle Louis. You hear about Uncle Louis from all 3 movies. She's moving in part 2. He's going to go to Fresno to deal with his Uncle Louis. And in part 3, that's where Lucille is. She's with Uncle Louis. Those little details I thought were really awesome. It showed that they wanted to wrap the story around. Another one, Johnny Lawrence in episode 5, he says to Miguel, "This is a knitting class, not a dojo." Well, that's exactly what John Kreese says to Mr. Miyagi. When Mr. Miyagi comes in, he says, "This is a dojo, not a knitting class." You can almost see how their pasts make them who they are. That being said, there are some things that did go a little overboard, and that's one of them. There was a little bit of overboard they went a little too far at the end. I agree with trying to make everything mirror the first movie and then just come out with a different ending.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The Easter eggs were a lot of fun, and that's what we're going to go through and talk about a lot of those episode by episode. But that's all it was. It just felt like they just forced the fight to the match, the bracket and everything to end exactly where you knew it was going to go. You knew exactly who was going to. Well, when I say I knew exactly who was going to win, I was trying to figure out Sam's part, because it did change. This time, Cobra Kai won instead of Daniel, if you want to look at it that way. But Miguel, like you said, Miguel was Daniel's character, and Johnny's character was now Robbie. By the way, I can't stand Robbie. I think that kid's a punk, and I hope he's more revealed that he's not a full convert, or however you want to look at it. But that's all it was. I love Johnny's character. This is his story, and it makes you help you understand where it's coming from in the first movie. But it was just kind of hammered in at the end too much. That's all. But
yeah. And another thing about the story that I loved was I loved what I would call the aha moments. And what I mean by that is there are a lot of situations in this where they actually go back to before the Karate Kid and give you some more sense of why Johnny is the way that he is. You get a scene where he first comes to the Cobra Kai dojo and sees it and thinks how cool it is. You learn that he actually got in a lot of fights because he was bullied, that he had no friends. And you get a sense that the Cobra Kai come together, and you see that with these kids. These are kids who are kind of socially awkward, that don't have a lot of friends, that band together to kind of fight bullying. It's still an anti-bullying movie. The Karate Kid is about bullies and anti-bullying. And you can see that Cobra Kai is also about anti-bullying, just a different way of dealing with it.
But then they become bullies by the end of it, and that was the crazy twist. Not
right.
Crazy. It was a little too hammered. And that's the thing. That's what I'm talking about. Like, if they need a little more time, that's one thing I hated about Miguel's character. Miguel is my favorite character. I think Miguel was so much more lovable and entertaining and likable than Daniel ever was. I never really liked Daniel, and this movie made me like him even, or the show made me like him even less. And the only thing I appreciated about him when I was a kid watching him was that he was a bully and he fought his way or figured out his way out of these situations, and that was really admirable. But usually it was Miyagi getting him out of everything. But this one, you have Miguel dealing with his own stuff, and he's applying the stuff he's learning from Cobra Kai, from Johnny. But Miguel's dealing with stuff himself. He goes on the date. He's just like Daniel did that. But when he goes to school and everything, he's fighting his own fights. Daniel never did that. You know, Daniel, I guess he kind of did a little bit, but it was not as bold. It wasn't as dramatic of a change as you saw in Miguel. And then you start seeing him in the last episode and a half, him turn a little bit dark at the end, and then suddenly he's like this big evil jerk at the end. I think that was a little forced. If they had smoothed that transition out a little bit for his little mini arc at the end, it'd have been more believable. But like 2 episodes before, like episode 7 or 8, he was still this really good kid. And all of his friends were getting like kind of this dark side about him, and they were getting really arrogant with their fighting and getting trying to get into mischief and things and trying to fight back and retaliate against the popular kids. Miguel wasn't really into it. He didn't care about all that. He wasn't in there trying to buy a beer and going to the beach before the girl and everything. He was just trying to hook up and connect with Sam and figure out his relationship. And then instantly in the final fight, now he's this dark side character. I didn't like that.
Well, you know, it's interesting. There's a little bit of parody there, too, because we only see Johnny when he has that moment with Allie and Daniel. maybe we would have seen a different side of Johnny had it started like Miguel's did. Because that moment, really, that moment with Sam is what turns him dark. When she shows up with Robbie to the party, that is when he turns dark. Similar to Johnny when he first sees Daniel with Allie, which is the first time you meet Johnny. That's when he turns dark. I mean, because at the very beginning in the first movie, before he even meets Daniel, he's talking with his friends and they're talking about, oh, you're the ace degenerate. And he says, no, I'm the X degenerate. I'm trying to make everything work. And I have a year to do it. And I'm going to make everything work. He's wanting to make things right and do things well. And when he sees this, that's what turns him into this dark character.
You buy that, though? That's the story he told Miguel, and he gave his little highlights about the scenario, and it made you think, oh my gosh, he was kind of a victim in the circumstances of the first movie. But that's one side of it. You really think that's exactly how it went down?
No, I don't. And I think that in the next season, they've really opened the door to an opportunity to have Allie come back. I don't necessarily buy that. I think that's his perspective. And I think he legitimately believes that's the way it went. But I think that we're going to hear from Allie, hopefully in season 2. They open the door for Allie to come back. There's a lot of talk about her. They do the whole thing in episode 9 with the Facebook and him talking about that. By the way, Facebook. See, here's the thing. That we'll talk more about characters, but I'll just highlight this. I didn't like, they went way overboard with Johnny's out of touch. Like way overboard with that. Yeah, I didn't like that. Who doesn't know what Facebook is? Okay. I mean, 80-year-olds know what Facebook is. They may not know how to use it, but they know what it is. For him to say something like, what's Facebook? Come on. Are we really to believe? He didn't
What's up Facebook? Like it's a tangible book.
What's a Facebook? Right. I mean, are we to believe that he literally just came through a time machine from the 80s? I mean, no. Back to the story about Miguel. What I think I love about this is you can see from episode to episode how the Cobra Kai teachings progress within Miguel. You know, it turns him, you can see at the beginning, the strike first, learning the strike first. Like, he learns, he's at the dance and he wants to go strike first and he doesn't, and someone comes in and scoops up the girls that he was going to go talk to before he could. You know, he learns those things, and as he goes forward more and more and more, he kind of gets more confidence, because that's what Cobra Kai is about. I mean, Johnny even says it. It's about gaining confidence. It's about standing up for yourself. It just goes overboard when you get to No Mercy, right? That's where it starts. Once you start learning, because you hear strike first, you get that. Then the episodes go to strike hard. And then towards the end, it's the No Mercy clicks in. And that's when you go bad, right? And so there's that. The other thing I think about the story is there's a very Star Wars balance to the Force type issue going on here with the Cobra Kai and Miyagi-Do. You know?
Everyone. Yeah, well, yes. That like the light and dark side, yeah.
Yeah,
but that's a lot of different characters. Yes, go ahead.
Sure. And so there's that whole balance to the Force thing, because the other thing I find really interesting about the story is they fill up a lot of plot holes in this series that I absolutely love. Like, one of the questions I had at the very beginning when we saw the teasers is, are we really to believe that 34 years later, like, these guys are still having like a rivalry over a karate fight? Like, their lives could go so, like, just go so different, divergent, so two different areas over a karate tournament. But with one line, they clear that all up when Daniel's wife says to the advertising people, well, here in the Valley back in the 80s, karate was like football in Texas. And that just cleared it up. You know, yeah. It's this in the Valley, in the Karate Kid universe, karate was as big as football in Texas, which is huge. The whole state is involved in it. So it made more sense.
Where Daniel was like a celebrity, even though
right.
he was 2 years. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And he can feed off of that celebrity, and that's why he is where he is, right? And so And I thought the whole thing, the All Valley thing, was really great. How they did the board and how Daniel's on the board and how Johnny came there because of Cobra Kai. They tie in Terry Silver, which I think is great. And in part 3, and you get to hear Johnny say, "I have no idea about any of that." And then there's some doubts raised at the end with that awesome cliffhanger. And so, anyway, huh?
You'd say it.
Yeah, I mean,
as soon as you saw the silhouette, I knew who it was.
Yeah, and so I wanted to talk about, and you can tell me if you had any of these. I call them big pop moments, and what I mean by that is when wrestling, they talk about the big pop when everybody explodes and everyone goes excited in the crowd. There were 2 for me big pop moments. Obviously, the return of John Kreese. I mean, when I watched it the first time, I saw the silhouette and I was like, oh no, that cannot be. Is he really alive? Because Johnny says he's dead, right? Yeah. So when you think, oh, okay, John Kreese is dead. Well, okay, that makes sense. That's why he's not around. I like that for 2 reasons. One, that's going to add a lot of depth to the story. We're going to learn a lot more about John Kreese. We're going to find out where he's been. We're probably going to learn a lot more about his relationship with Johnny, which is going to be great. And then also it fills a giant, what I thought was the elephant in the room of this whole thing, and that is, how in the world does Johnny Lawrence all of a sudden just open up a Cobra Kai dojo? He doesn't own the rights to Cobra Kai. How's that even possible?
I was thinking about that. When he went to the board, I was like, why didn't he just open up his own dojo then? And if they were a band, how did he get the franchise? And the other thing I thought was like, well, we never saw the dollar amount on the check he got from his stepdad, and we don't know exactly what he did with it. I mean, you could stretch your imagination to think that he went and bought the rights with that money, but it still was kind of hokey weird. And now he's got this big marketing scheme that he could open up all these dojos, and that's what Daniel's worried about. And he's gonna open up his Miyagi-Do dojos. But yeah, Kreese steps in and he's like, you got it back. You won. And he's excited about the franchise. Seriously, that's all Kreese ever cared about was Cobra Kai. That philosophy, that way of life. And not even his influence, but more like his almost his celebrity status. He's a champion, and he wants to live and be just the best. I'm not gonna start the song, but he's gonna that's all he wanted. He just wanted to dominate, and that was what it was in the most important sport in that community. So I guess.
So then the other thing is, when I watched it the second time, I was watching it with my son, and he when he watch it, I was kind of dozing towards the end. It was getting kind of late when he was watching through the episode, so I started falling asleep.
A real Karate Kid fan would never fall asleep watching.
And so then I woke up to my son going, "Is that John Kreese? Is that John Kreese?" As soon as he saw the silhouette, and I woke up, and John Kreese, and when he pops in, he goes, "Oh my gosh!" Like he was so excited to see him, and so obviously that was the biggest moment in the whole show, was that, and they were building to that, and it was fantastically done, and that also opens up the door to so many questions. So did Johnny know the whole time that John Kreese was alive? Was John Kreese involved when Johnny was going through this, just kind of playing in the background, or did he really not know? Because I mean, there's that scene in episode 9 where he's sitting there at the bar with Daniel and saying, yeah, well, at least your sensei didn't try to kill you and break your second place trophy. So did he know what's going on?
I don't believe so, because the expression on his face when he saw him was almost like it was like he saw a ghost. I really think that, I don't think he like had read in a newspaper or something that he died, or had a phone call. I don't think Johnny has some concrete evidence. I think when he was talking to the board and saying that guy or Johnny, he's dead, I think he was saying like he's so far removed, or he hasn't heard from it. He speculated that he was gone and dead. I think he meant like that person is dead, like he's not in my life. I really don't believe that he thought he was dead, and it was like some kind of scheme where Johnny like faked his or John Kreese faked his death or something like that, or something that Johnny was in on it. I don't think he would have done that angle, but that expression on his face was most telling of that. I think he sincerely believed that Kreese was gone, not physically dead, and that he was in shock when he came back. And now he has to face his own demons, because that whole episode, at the end of it, he was trying, I think when he was drinking, that's what he was thinking about. He was staring at the trophy. He won this, but he didn't want to win it John Kreese style. He didn't want to win it by cheating. He didn't want to win it that way. And now here comes Kreese through the door. And just like a lot of other traumatic stories like that, it's gonna cause a reaction in him that could bring out that side of him. And I think he knows that. I think he's afraid of that. And that's going to bring out that dark side. The other interesting thing to me about Kreese being here is that now Daniel, as whiny and just pompous and stupid as he is right now, he doesn't have Miyagi. So what's he going to do? How's he going to protect himself or stand up against both Kreese and Johnny? Because Johnny's pretty equal with him as it is, as an influence and as a fighter. I'm sure even more so. But now we had Kreese in there, and now there's this double dark influence over. And it's not like Luke versus Darth Vader and the Emperor. Daniel is not a strong enough character in this. I don't know. I see him getting very overwhelmed, and I hope they write it very well.
So I don't know. There are a couple things I would disagree on that, and that is that I don't know if Johnny and Daniel are equal. If you think about it, Daniel and Johnny were kind of equal in the first Karate Kid. It's clear that up at least until November of 2011, Miyagi was there, and surely he was continually training him, so he's had to advance, whereas Johnny has been stuck in 1984 ever since that fight. So I don't know about that, but I do agree with you. It's going to be interesting to see. Now John Kreese is there. There's no Miyagi. How is that going to deal with it? But the other question that this opens up is...
Before you go on to your next question, Daniel said in his lame training sequence, you know, it's not about the moves and the skills and everything. That's great, but it's all about having that balance in your life. Daniel is so far off the mark from having balance in his life compared to Johnny. And he was the entire series. I think by the end of it, even though he had his son Robbie throw in the mix, when he went and talked to him after the fight and he had that little, you know, even though he walked off and left with his sensei, he still had that little bit of respect, I think, for Johnny. And when he said he was sorry, I think Robbie believed that. I think as far as what they're trying to do in their lives to get that balance back, Johnny is way more aligned than Daniel. Daniel's still full of confusion and frustration and hate and just bitterness, and he can't let go. I think Johnny's trying to let go. I don't
agree with that at all. I think that this story is about achieving balance for both of them. I don't think that Johnny is anywhere near balanced yet. He got his win. I got out of that Johnny realized it almost felt like Johnny initially thought the win was going to bring him balance. Like the win is what he needed to get back. And then he realized at the end, especially with the way that they won, that wasn't gonna get him where he wanted to go. And also on top of that, we see that Johnny is not like Kreese.
Right. He told Miguel before that last round, we don't need to cheat. And it cut to him during the hit when he hit his shoulder and then he turned and then he kicked him in the chest. He was like, no, you know, that was that disappointment that this victory was not a solid victory. This wasn't the way he wanted to win. It wasn't fair. And he remembered that. That was the same reaction when John Kreese told him to sweep the leg. It was the same thing.
So the other thing I would say about that is also I think that Johnny is realizing, you remember, I think it was in episode 3, where Johnny is talking to Daniel at the school. And he says, I don't know why you want to bring back Cobra Kai. And Johnny says, well, I'm not John Kreese. And the teachings were good. And I think he's realizing when he sees in Miguel that Miguel is Cobra Kai, never dies, and he's basically doing what Kreese would want to do. I think Johnny's realizing that maybe the teachings are really not as good as he thought that they were. So, you know, we'll see where that goes. There's a lot of ways they could go with that. I'm very intrigued. I think that the cliffhanger was perfect, even though I hate it because now it's going to be forever before we know what happened. The other thing I think about this now is, where is Terry Silver coming back? Because Terry Silver was a bad dude. I loved that character from Part 3. Yeah. I didn't like Part 3 that much, but Terry Silver was a very interesting, intriguing character to kind of feed this Cobra Kai gimmick. He was the money behind Cobra Kai. So is he still around? Is he going to be involved? I really hope they don't bring Mike Barnes back. I doubt that they would. He's not necessary.
He didn't have anything to do with it.
He's not necessary at all. But it opens up the door to characters from the past coming back. Another big pop moment for me was the return of Lucille LaRusso. I loved her.
Yeah, she was funny.
she didn't have a big part in the show, and it kind of gave a little bit more depth to the wife. But it was just kind of a cool moment to see one of the characters coming back, and I thought that that was great. But I think the other big pop moment for me was Golf and Stuff. I loved, I loved when they went to Golf and Stuff because not only did they do that, but they played the exact same music that with Miguel and Sam that they did with Daniel and Allie, and I loved that. Even to the point where they were playing the little hockey game that you can't find in any arcade anywhere anymore. Somehow it's still a Golf and Stuff. So
yeah,
no, it wasn't foosball. It's like that hockey game that they used to have.
Oh, the little church, yeah.
Yeah, they used to have a Chuck E. Cheese, and you can't find it anywhere anymore. They had somehow had that still at Golf and Stuff, and I loved Sam saying, "I can't believe you brought me here. My dad brought me here a bunch of times," and you also see that Golf and Stuff plays a very integral role in the whole story because you can see now why Johnny is so pissed off because that's where he went with Allie on his first date, right? That's where he took all of his first dates in the Valley.
Which is funny because it was Allie's suggestion in the first movie to go to Golf and Stuff. Like, how mean is that?
Right. Isn't that such a jerk move? Like, and so all of that I thought was that when Johnny said, "Well, you got to take her to where I used to take all my first dates," I was like, "Oh, please be Golf and Stuff. Please be Golf and Stuff." And when it happened, I was like, "Yes!" You know, because
I watched some interview where they were saying that movie made Golf and Stuff as a real place out there, and it made it famous, and it stays in business because of the Karate Kid. I bet they're just loving that it's back.
Yeah, that was a great moment too. And so, okay, so another thing, what were some of the negatives that you found? So we talked about a few of them. Were there any other negatives that you saw?
His name is Daniel LaRusso. If you've heard of him, he was a completely negative thing in this series. I can't stand. What do you mean? What am I talking about? That character. He was. So you first meet him. He's pompous. He's arrogant. Yeah, and Johnny goes in the dealership. He does something nice. He's kind of torn about, but it was after he was kind of being a jerk with his friends, illegal kick to the face. Which, by the way, how many kids in the final match of this show got kicked in the face? Like, that was half the points in this was getting kicks in the face. So that kind of negates that point, unless they change the rules. But whatever. But he was like that, and then you're like, oh well, that's just how he is. He wasn't trying to be a jerk to Johnny. It was just kind of playing around. But then he helped him with his car and everything. But he was just like that in episode like 5 and then 7 and then 8 and 9. He's been like that the whole time. Right in the middle, they hit the brakes on how stupid Daniel was being with their little rivalry that was going on earlier with him and the other dealer and the other car dealer, and then him with Johnny, and how they had this misinformation about who was doing what to who, and that Johnny spray painted on the billboard, and then Daniel had to let that go. There's a little moment where they had to do the little tribute, and they had Daniel go to Miyagi's grave and say his little prayer to Miyagi, and then go back and do his really lame kata in his dojo and clean up. You're like, okay, now Daniel's going to be focused and he's going to maintain that through the show. No, he went right back to being a whiny jerk. He went back to being a car salesman, and everything that was happening with his daughter, he was just trying to push and parent kind of aggressively, and that bitterness, he couldn't drop it. Every time he saw or heard anything about Cobra Kai, it was just as spiteful as it was earlier in the show. There was no change. They just stopped for a minute to talk about Miyagi and him to be like, oh, I got balance and I'm going to let go. No, he went back to being a jerk. He was a jerk, and he's whiny. He's out of shape. He can barely, even when he kicked the coffee, hated that moment. I can't stand Daniel after this show. And I was glad that Cobra Kai won, and I felt bad for Robbie being in the middle of it. But as soon as he was like, oh, we're going to bring back Miyagi-Do, I'm like, Daniel, you're not a good sensei. And that's the other thing. I didn't feel like they added anything to the Miyagi style or the training. Nothing was added with, even though he tried to tell little stories. Everything was telling him, everything was telling Sam was word for word what Miyagi told him, which is fine. But they tried to include or add a little bit more. I don't think anything worked. I couldn't stand Daniel in this. Every time he was on, I'm like, oh, someone just punched him in the face.
So I agree in some ways. One, I think that Ralph Macchio needs to do some stretching or something and getting a little more shape to be doing some of those kicks. I actually told my wife on the third run through as we were watching, I told her, I go, man, they really need to limit his like action sequence time on these.
And he didn't do any. Like when you think back, he did like 2 or 3 things, but they were so bad it stood out for the whole series.
Yeah,
he looks great for his age. Don't get me wrong. I know he's like 50 something, but still, you can work around that with cuts and editing. There's ways to film that so you can make it look like he's doing it really well.
The kata was a little rough. The kick, although in context, looked a little bit better than it did on the teaser. So I thought that. I also, one thing about that scene, and I was going to save this for when we talk about 3 and 4, but I'll say it now. That scene is very similar to the scene on the beach with Mr. Miyagi. That's very much a Mr. Miyagi move. He went in there to kind of squash it. And you're right. He's not Mr. Miyagi. Daniel is an admitted hothead just like Johnny. And you're seeing that. And you're seeing his struggle without a Miyagi there, without Mr. Miyagi there, and him having to deal with balance. And the whole thing, the whole story with Daniel is about him trying to achieve balance, and he just can't do it because he doesn't have someone teaching him. He says at the thing, he said, it's funny, I thought that when I was a kid that you had all the answers, but maybe you were just I feel like I don't have anything, and I'm, you were probably better at hiding it. And then he had that sequence in the show, and I thought that was beautifully done where they go back to him sitting in the car, and he's sitting in the car that he has now, just like the car when Miyagi was sitting there. And it's almost like he's hearing Miyagi, right there saying it's all about balance, all about life. And he says the literal same words that he says to him then when he says, "You understand?" "Yeah, I do." Right. And then he drives off, and then you get the admittedly kind of bad action sequence where he's in there trying to, get back ready. I did love the music though. They played the same music, and I thought that was really exciting and added to it. But you're right.
The music and the whole thing, we'll kind of go through it episode by episode later, but the music was fantastic. I would buy this soundtrack if it was available. Everything. Definitely. They played the nice Bill Conti stuff when it was appropriate. They played other songs, new songs when it was appropriate. I wanted to hear "You're the Best Around" during this final fight, but I understand there's licensing issues with that probably, and expenses. But the score was just phenomenal. It was really well done.
Definitely. The other negative I would say about this is I thought it was too crass. And I'm someone who doesn't necessarily, I'm not someone who is easily offended by cussing or things of that nature, or, pictures like the billboard. I'm not somebody who's like that. But The Karate Kid is a family-friendly movie. My 4-year-old can watch it. I'm comfortable with him watching the original Karate Kid, and all of my kids love it from age 4 to 11. I don't know if I'm comfortable showing. I am not comfortable showing my 4-year-old and my 7-year-old girl this movie or this show, especially episodes 4 and 5, really, because they really focus on the billboard and the spray painting of that and reference that a lot. There's a lot of cussing in this. And like I said, I'm not one who necessarily shies away from that. I mean, I obviously don't cuss and I don't do things like that, but I can handle that type of stuff. But it feels like the spirit of the Karate Kid is a little deadened in that. And I understand that this is a different movie or a different show. It's about Cobra Kai, and that is a little more crass. So maybe that makes sense. But I felt like it was unnecessarily crass at times.
Yeah, agreed. And there was vulgarity that came from like Daniel and stuff, where you don't have like this contrast. Because there were references to like the billboard and that stuff by everyone, and it kept coming and coming and coming. And I agree with that. I think it took me out of it. The trailer where it had the Miguel was wiping the window. And he says, "Is there any special way you want me to do it?" And he says, "I don't give a sh," and then cuts it. That was funny in the trailer, but in the series, it said it, and that was fine. It's not like I hear that I'm like, "Oh my gosh," But it's that one little moment. There was ways they could have made it kind of funny by doing a little editing like that. that they didn't do. They didn't cover it up. And I said this from the trailers when I was worried about those guys that did the Hot Tub Time Machine. It's pretty crass and dirty humor, a lot of it. And I was kind of concerned about that, if you remember me speculating about that. But it wasn't too far, but I agree. It's a different tone than
it was PG-13, you know, and so it's not like it's, you know, R-rated humor. I mean, there's, I think, one F word in the whole thing. And
I didn't catch it. I heard people say that, but I didn't catch it.
There was one F word I caught when Robbie says it when he sees it's my, you know, this is my effing dad. And the thing that's interesting is in the episode right before that, they show a clip of what's coming next, and it just says that's my dad. So they had one without the cuss word, and they chose the one with the cuss word to put in the show, which was fine. I mean, like I said, it didn't bother me, and you know, there was some funny stuff. Like the billboard was kind of funny, and dealing with that was kind of funny. You know, it was obviously it emphasized the fact that Johnny hadn't progressed at all. That was totally a high school move to do something like that with the spread.
Drunk at the time, who cares?
Right, but I guess the point is family wise, I think that there are kids who, you know, we have a second generation of people that we, you know, of our kids that we share our favorite movies with. And this is one of the ones in my family that I've shared with. You know, I've shared this movie, and they all want to see this. They all want to see it. And I don't know. I mean, I'm struggling with whether I'm going to let my kids watch it, especially episode 4, because of that. So that was the negative. That being said, story-wise, thought it was great. We've talked a lot about characters. So here's the one we haven't talked about yet. What did you think of Hawk?
I think Hawk was a good example of where you were describing the Cobra Kai philosophies. I think that the comparison there is with Miguel. I mean, you have Miguel, who is well, actually all three of them. You have the three nerds at the table, Miguel, and then the other two kids, Eli and I can't remember the other one's name, the funny one that didn't stay in the class. He was hilarious, by the way. I love that character. But Hawk was someone that took the abuse, left, and came back, and he earned Johnny's respect because he didn't like back down. He went and he shed the skin. That was in the molting episode, I think, where he came back and he was like, I changed my appearance and everything. But the description he gives later was with the other kid at the beach is he said, it's not about the hairdo, it's not about the back tattoo and everything. It's about this attitude. It's about the momentum. It's about just feeling the whatever, however describes it, the energy or whatever the moment, and just like going with it. And you know what? That's actually that's not a bad philosophy for life. You know, that's a whole seize the day kind of a mentality, which is a good thing. I think it needs to be bridled a little bit, which is where when he cuts loose on the fight or in the fights, that's when he kicks the guy in the back, that's where you have to have some restraint. But I don't think there's anything wrong with embracing a little, I don't know, passion, you could say. And I don't think it was all about aggression. I don't think he was doing it to become a jerk or a punk, even though this whole group did become a gang by the end of it. You can look at it no other way. And that's one of my concerns about Cobra Kai Dogma. But yeah, he embraced it. He came back and earned Johnny's respect. And when Johnny saw him do that cheap move and get disqualified, he's like, those were my friends growing in high school. That's what your buddy Dutch would have done. But
that was my thing. I was trying to figure out who is of the original Cobra Kai, who is Hawk. And I thought at times I thought he was very Dutchish. You know, he was very Dutch-like, and times I thought he was very Tommy-like. Because Tommy was kind of the crazy one. Like there's a reference there to Hawk being quote unquote on the spectrum, right? Like he might be a little autistic. And you know, Tommy says a lot of crazy things. In fact, that was another thing I loved. A detail I loved in this was the part where he's telling the story. Johnny's telling Miguel the story of how it all went down with LaRusso. And then he makes a reference to, I think my friend Tommy got brain damage from that fight. And it's so funny because when you go back and you think about it, all the crazy stuff that's said in that movie that people remember, you know, like must be take a worm for a walk week or get him a body bag. That's all Tommy's saying that stuff, and it's all post Miyagi fight. So it's really funny to see, and that like that crazy laugh and all those things he does. Like that's so I wondered, is Hawk more Tommy or is he more Dutch? And I think he's got pieces of both of them.
He's his own character, but I think as far as his place in this story, that was the cool thing was he was the the embodiment of the Cobra Kai mentality, the philosophy. What Johnny was trying to do with these kids and helping them shed out of being complete losers or social outcasts and everything to like step up, take the abuse, but like man up and do it. And he saw that there was bad that came out of that too. They have to have some control. I think you're right. I think there's a line where you have, strike first, strike hard, but no mercy. But at the same time, striking first is what got Miguel in trouble at the beach. He didn't have any restraint and he cut loose on Robbie, and that's what cost him Sam by the end. So I don't know. There's a good discussion we can have later about the two philosophies. I think there's a lot to talk about who's right and who's wrong. Because there's a light and dark balance that's going on here.
Johnny Lawrence tells Miguel when he says, okay, you didn't know how to defend yourself. And the best way to defend yourself is more offense, right? It's all strike first. Well, if you look at the Miyagi way, everything that Daniel learns from the very beginning is all defensive moves. Wax on, wax off, paint the house, paint the fence, sand the floor. Those are all blocks. The first thing he learns is defense.
That's what he told Bobby in the last match. He said, let him come to you. Don't be aggressive.
Right. So it's that counterbalance there. I mean, there's an episode called Counterbalance. And I love that because that's exactly what Miyagi-Do and Cobra Kai really is. So wrapping this up, what do you hope to see coming out in the season 2?
I only want one thing. I want a fight between Johnny and Daniel. I really do. I love my favorite. You said what was my favorite, or the what you call it, movie popping or whatever.
Big pop moments.
Yeah, my favorite thing was the scene where the whole episode where they were hanging out together against their will, and Johnny went back because his cousin destroyed his car. He wanted his refund, or he wanted his car back, and it was just Daniel's wife, who was a hilarious character, who told Daniel, just take care of him, get him out of your life. Like, not like get him out of our house. He was like, you need to be done with this because you need to grow up. Because she's still like, it was embarrassing that they're still fighting over this freaking high school rivalry. It's ridiculous. And that's why she's like, when she came out, they're ready to fight. He was like, seriously, I don't want to have to clean freaking blood off the patio. It was hilarious.
My favorite thing was how stupid it sounded when she was like, they all realized how dumb they sounded when she's like, yeah, as much as I'd like to see you fight your high school karate rival here, and I really don't want blood on the patio. So how about come in and have some breakfast?
He's like, I could eat. And so they go in, they humble themselves, they tolerate each other's company just long enough. They go to the dealership, they're still making one-liners to each other. And then there's no one else to take him on a test drive, but Johnny still insists on a drive, not trying to go with Daniel. He wants to drive it. He doesn't trust him. And so they go and they're like bitter. They have the same interest in music. They both appreciated cars, and they're starting to find out that they actually do have some common ground. And I thought that was hilarious. And then they go to the bar, they start drinking, and then Daniel starts ordering more when he's like, this is interesting. But they're still knocking and teasing each other. And then they go back, the best line in the whole series, where they start talking about having their fight like Apollo and Rocky did. And Rocky 3 reference.
I love the Rocky 3 reference.
Yeah. They want to go out. And I thought they were going to do it. I thought they were going to go into his dojo and then cut to where the audience doesn't get to see who wins the fight. But they were excited. It was just really funny. And then bam, then it all hits the fan again when he sees Robbie's been a student. But all those conversations, and especially in the car, was my favorite part. That was the best episode of the series to me.
I thought that was so great. The Rocky 3 reference was so great. And then they go in there, and I thought we were going to have a drunken battle between the two of them. That would have been hilarious. And then it got totally ruined by Robbie coming in. And I thought that was a big bummer for me, because I actually kind of liked the fact that they were getting along, and you get to see them the same, and you're like, this is really cool. Maybe they actually can turn it around and be buddies. And then Robbie comes in, and you're like, oh man, everything's screwed up again. You can see that these guys were just victims. It seems like they're victims of circumstance.
Everyone in the show was, and that's the thing. It did get, the whole story got a little too 90210. It really did. There was so much all this back and forth drama and this he said, she said, and I misunderstood this, and I oversaw this happening, and I misread it, and she's not answering my phone, like all this drama that if everyone just like calmed down just for like 5 seconds and heard what was actually going on, it'd all be over. Of course, you don't have a story that way, but it'd get really soap opera-y, but it's okay.
But that also goes back to the teachings. Strike first, right? It's all about your initial reactions. And like I said, when we get through these episodes, we'll kind of talk more about the specifics, because I got some really interesting specifics out of each one of these episodes, especially running it through the second time around. I recommend that everybody, if you're a Karate Kid fan, which I'm sure if you're watching this, you are, that you go back a second time. I would say watch the trilogy again and then go through it a second time, and you can see the parody and some of the things that how all of the lessons that these guys learned are continuing to affect them, and also how it's affecting this next generation, because it all has to do with the teachings they're learning from these father figures. I mean, even an example is there's a lot of parody. You'll see in episode 3, there's another scene where he's shown him kicking the boards, and he's got legs, stomach, face, just like Terry Silver teaching the first episodes of the first lessons with Daniel. And you're like, interesting. Daniel was actually learning real Cobra Kai lessons. He just didn't learn the entire lesson, right? He just learned to strike first. And you can see through Miguel how that doesn't work. He did the strike first, and his first fight was after learning that exact lesson, and he got the crap kicked out of him again. That's the type of stuff that. So it's very interesting. I loved in the story the progression of the Cobra Kai way and what the end results of that are, versus you see Daniel as the end results of Mr. Miyagi and Miyagi-Do karate in 2 and 3. And unfortunately now, because there's no Miyagi anymore, he's back to dealing with balance issues. So very excited about this. I'm very excited to see where season 2 comes. There's clearly going to be a season 2 because of the success of season 1. Ralph Macchio said that they hope to be doing this for a long time, so they obviously have an idea for season 2 and maybe even subsequent seasons. I actually like the 10-episode season.
I think it just needed just a little more. I think it felt a little rushed towards about 8 and 9, or 9 and 10.
Yeah, so you wanted a better progression in the No Mercy?
Just a little bit, yeah. Because it was fine. I liked how everything was happening, all the twists, and who was figuring what out. But then at the very end, like I said with Miguel, it's like in episode 8 and 9, he was on the beach. He was fine. He's just sad about his girlfriend. Instantly, he's a jerk. He's like, and he goes contrary to Johnny's teachings. It's fine for a story arc. I didn't mind it. I liked it. It was interesting, and I can't. I want to see the redemption of Miguel more than anything. That's the other thing. I want to see a fight between Daniel and Johnny, or something, or maybe a fight between Kreese. But he's an old man. I don't know. I don't know what they would do that. But I want to see the redemption of Miguel. I want Miguel to end up with Sam. I will be so annoyed with the series over long term if Miguel, because like I said, he's the much more likable character that you can appreciate, this nerdy underdog rising up. Now he's got some challenges. He went too high. Now he's got to cool down a little bit. But finding the balance with himself and getting what Daniel never got. He never got the girl. He never got the full redemption. He didn't have the status he was fighting for. I want to see that. But anyway.
Well, what I want to see is this season seemed to really focus on the Cobra Kai and Johnny and him trying to redeem himself. And in a way he did. And Daniel was kind of stuck in this middle position and this unbalanced position between Sam and dealing with Johnny and kind of being in the middle of a real awkward situation with everybody. Well, now it seems like Johnny is going to be in this awkward situation because on one hand, he realizes that maybe what he's learned is not the correct way and there needs to be some adjustments. But here you have John Kreese on the other side now, who's going to kind of play this Darth Vader Emperor role to kind of try to pull him more to the dark side. So it'll be really interesting to see Johnny's progression in that way and to learn more about him and John Kreese. As I said earlier, I really hope in season 2, Ali comes back in some way, and they've kind of opened the door to that happening. So I'd really like to see that. I'd like to see a lot more of maybe somehow more lessons that maybe Miyagi had taught Daniel to show the progression after?
No, because they did that terribly. The stupid one hand, he was doing that Luke Skywalker Dagobah stance with his one hand. That was so dumb. And then the kid just learned and did it. By the way, the crane kick that that Miguel did in the beginning was awesome. But anyway, that was so stupid. They didn't add anything with anything that Miyagi had done.
Well, that was okay, but what I'm saying there is that was the only thing that they've tried, and they try to do that with every Karate Kid. They try to give some sort of another counterintuitive lesson that you don't see. They did it with the drum thing, and it was okay. It wasn't anything special. And
you had Miyagi as a good mentor. Daniel's a horrible mentor.
Well, we'll see. Okay, there's still more time. This was Johnny's story, and Daniel was a part of it, and it was a struggle for him. But now that he's opening up Miyagi-Do, you're going to see more about that. He's not opening up a dojo per se. That was another thing I love, going back to Mr. Miyagi's home and going into his backyard. That was awesome too. It doesn't seem like he's going to open up a karate dojo. It seems like he's going to bring some people in to teach him for free, because that was definitely not.
Well, why? What's his motive? To get back at Johnny. He even alluded to that. He said that. Said,
I don't think it's about getting back at Johnny. It's about
he's like, I gotta build me an army to counter the Cobra Kai. That's really how it feels. His own motive is to stop the Cobra Kai from opening up, and he was like, no, I'm not gonna let that.
But you understand the reason why, and that is because the Cobra Kai is almost it's almost the what would I call it? The Reformed Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints of karate. Okay, it's the philosophies of men mingled with Scripture. That's what it is, right? It's the people. It's a bloated, apostate version of karate. It's a version that is totally counter to what karate, and Mr. Miyagi would know, because Mr. Miyagi his family created karate in this universe. Okay, it's completely different than what it's supposed to be. So I don't think for Daniel it's a measure of revenge to try to stop Johnny. It's about bringing in true karate to these kids' lives and achieving balance, because otherwise you're just going to get a bunch of Cobra Kai kids. I mean, the fact that
that's the thing is Daniel's too hot-headed of a character. He was hot-headed even during the fight. That's the problem. He's not a good mentor because he has no balance. That's why he's not the right person. He's not prepared to bring it on. You know what I could see him happening is him screwing up his students, and then Sam, who stepped out of it in the middle, and maybe she's gonna be like, you know what? There's a better way to do this. That would be more interesting to me if she's another thing. Back.
That was the other thing I hope to see is I hope to see more of Sam in this, because there are little things that you can see that Sam knows karate. That right before Miguel jumps in I think it's episode 5, where he has the awesome fight in the school against all the bullies, you could see that Sam was about to lay the smackdown on Kyler. You could see she was starting to ball up her fist like she was going to go after him, and Miguel stepped in. And then there was that scene at golf and stuff where she took Miguel down. Right. So it'll be interesting if they try to do a next Karate Kid situation with her, like they, and hopefully we don't see Hilary Swank come anywhere near this. But you never know. If that happens, I'll give it a big thumbs down. But maybe they'll do something like that. So it'll be interesting to see Sam's arc, because she's really fit into an Allie role here, big time. And so I look forward to that too. And like I said, I mean, the big thing for me is I want Allie to come back, because there's clearly baggage there for both of them. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out between Daniel and Johnny.
Yeah, I agree. Well, lots to look forward to. I do hope it keeps going, but if they're going to plan multiple seasons more, it's going to get more and more 90210-y, and I just hope they don't get too overboard with it, where it's a bunch of really dumb little soap opera plot points or plot twists. So if they keep it good like this, I'd be fine with it.
Well, yeah, if there's anything that this has taught me, it's that we should definitely give them, they've earned a measure of trust in my mind. So let's see where it goes. In this, there were so many ways that one wrong turn could have screwed the whole thing up, and they made all the right turns. And so, sure, there were some things that I think came off a little not as good as they'd hoped, but nothing's perfect, right? I mean, So if we're going to give this a view, I mean, I know you can't see it in the theaters, but I would say this is definitely a celestial show. You should see it immediately. If you are a Karate Kid fan, you should watch it. If you're not a Karate Kid fan, you should watch it and then go back and watch the trilogy and realize how awesome the trilogy is. This was everything that a fanboy of anything would ever expect, and I just have to say hats off to everybody involved because it was absolutely everything I could have ever hoped for. It was a great homage to the original, and I look forward to the second season. A+ effort.
Yeah, I agree. And it's really cool that you can see the first two for free on YouTube. And then they're right now doing their first month of YouTube Red for free. So thank you, YouTube, for that. And we, you know, Josh and I have a subscription. We're watching it. We're enjoying it. Josh even watched some other stuff or stuff you watched.
I did. And I plan on actually and doing some reviewing on that. And Tim, if you'll watch those, we'll do a joint review on a couple of them. I think we'll probably see things a little bit differently.
Yeah, cool.
But yeah, that's another thing is I'm sold on YouTube Red now, and I think that it's a great subscription. My YouTube viewing has been definitely different, and so hopefully I'll continue that as well. And just looking forward to what comes up. So okay, so now thank you everybody. We got to give a hearty thank you to everybody who's been watching. This is great to see the comments from real Karate Kid fans. Thank you for everybody who supported us, and we will, like I said, over the next week or so, we'll be releasing very more detailed episode by episode videos. We'll take them two at a time and just kind of go through the whole thing and talk about what we liked and didn't like and some of the details we saw and the Easter eggs we saw that were great. So
we'll look at some of your comments as well, and they won't be quite as lengthy as this discussion was, but there's a lot to say about this show for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Anything else, Tim?
Nope, just it's awesome. Just go watch it and then come back and let's talk about it. And if you have any questions or anything you want us to talk about in our reviews, you know, mention in the comments now, and then we'll keep watching those as we do these next few episodes about the show for sure.
Okay, well that's it, and you know, keep watching. And if you like what you see, subscribe. We're also on Facebook and Twitter at Saints on Cinema, so we look forward to the discussion, especially with all the fanboys and girls of Karate Kid. So for Saints on Cinema, I'm Josh Edlow.
And I'm Tim Wild.
Have a good one.